My long journey through the entire Assassin's Creed series sees us finally arriving at Odyssey, and oh my god, there's a lot to get through with this one. I thought this would be a shorter video, as playing this for the first time, I assumed this game would be pretty much the same as Origins, just in a different setting. And for the most part, I think that's reasonably accurate, but the last 15 or 20 hours of this game brought up a lot of emotion for me, so we have one or two things to discuss. First and foremost, I should point out that Greece is probably my favourite country that I've ever visited. My wife and I got stuck there in our camper van during the pandemic, and we ended up becoming legal residents for a while. All of this to say that I am the sort of dickhead that points at the screen and goes, "Oh, that's that thing, we've been there, remember that thing?" And I loved all the Greek mythology stuff when I was a kid, so it's fair to say I have some fairly positive bias towards anything to do with ancient Greek stuff. There's so much to get into with this game that I'm really not sure where to start, so I'll do the same as last time and run through the story and then start going through the features that make this game unique in this long-running series. Set during the Peloponnesian War of 431 to 404 BC, we play as either Cassandra or Alexios, grandchildren of the great Spartan leader Gerard Butler. Cassandra appears to be the canonical choice for people who care about that sort of thing, and apparently she was originally supposed to be the only option here until some idiot got worried that people don't play games with girls in them, and they added a male option. Which I believe makes this the third Assassin's Creed game in a row where the female lead was supposed to be the sole character, but someone chickened out due to archaic beliefs that female-fronted games don't sell well. After initially choosing to play as Alexios, I soon changed my mind after I heard his voice acting and quickly swapped to Cassandra. My first impression of her voice wasn't much better, to be honest, and the game as a whole has a much lower quality of voice acting than the rest of the series. I mentioned in my last video, I don't think the Assassin's Creed games get enough credit for the generally excellent quality of the voice work, which makes the more static performances here stand out so much more. The dialogue in Odyssey, combined with the significant absence of actual cutscenes, gives the game a rushed feeling right from the start. It feels very obvious that these lines were recorded in isolation somewhere rather than with the person they're talking to, and the fact that the characters flap their mouths either in Team America and just cycle through a pool of arm-waving animations furthers this cheap feeling. Anyway, we join Cassandra, currently living on Kefalonia as a mercenary, and keeping the broken spearhead of her grandfather at her side as it comes in handy when killing people. Over the first few hours of the game, we learn that her younger brother was to be thrown off a cliff that Spartans tend to throw babies off, though this is now largely considered to be a myth. In fact, most of what people associate with Sparta and its people likely stems from myths and stories, as recorded history, particularly in Sparta, wasn't really a big thing back then, and it's usually just overcompensating macho dickheads who try to keep these myths alive. Back to this story though, and Cassandra, in an attempt to save her brother, survived being thrown from the cliff herself and found her way to Kefalonia, where she was raised by a local con artist. When we join her, she's offered a contract by a shadowy figure to kill the Wolf of Sparta, a Spartan general currently trying to oust the Athenians on the mainland. It turns out that Mr. Wolf is actually her father, whom she hasn't seen since said cliff throwing. She acquires a boat by saving a ship captain called Barnabas and heads to the mainland to have a word with her estranged father. Once she eventually gets face to face with her dad, she learns that not only is he actually her stepfather, but that her mother is still alive and out there somewhere, having left Sparta. On my playthrough, I ended up killing him after this revelation, assuming that the dialogue choices were actually just different ways of wording the same thing, so I assume that he would die here and I can just decide whether Cassandra is happy about it or not. Turns out he can actually survive up until the end, but this is something I'll properly get into later, along with all the other stuff I've missed out up to this point. The chap who hired us to kill the wolf turns out to be a member of the Cult of Kosmos, who know about you being a descendant of Gerard Butler and want you and your family dead. Cassandra tracks him down and kills him and steals his robes and mask and travels to Delphi to speak with the Oracle, who confirms that the cult are trying to kill you. Using her new disguise, Cassandra infiltrates a cult meeting where their feared champion Demos is set to arrive. The other members confirm that they want your family dead, and then through a vision you get after touching a glowing pyramid, both Cassandra and Demos learn that they are siblings. I feel like if we didn't see Alexios' face on the character select screen, then this might have been a bit more of a dramatic revelation, but I guess letting easily offended men play as a man is more important than good storytelling, right? Deimos doesn't quite know what to do with this information, so you scurry out of there and set about trying to rid Greece of this shadowy cult that has already wormed its way throughout the country and is secretly controlling it. You also vow to find your mother, now knowing that she is alive and is being targeted. With an entire country and all the seas amongst it to explore, this takes a while and leads you all across ancient Greece. Eventually you find your mum, take her back to Sparta, and help to get your old family home back. Along the way, you eliminate members of the cult and bump into your brother a few more times, who has no interest in playing happy families after being raised by a shadowy group of murderers. Funny that. At the end of the main story, you finally face Deimos in a fight to the death. Or at least it was for me, as the option to try to talk him out of killing me seemed like a silly idea after all the times he has tried to end my life. Apparently you can save him too, and you can get a happy cutscene where the whole family are back together and everything's great. I didn't get that. I got a cutscene where Cassandra and her mom sit down to dinner, and that's it. The story spends about 40 hours or so cycling between killing Spartans, killing Athenians, killing cultists, Spartans, Athenians, cultists, and this goes on until it just sort of ends. I killed Deimos and got the prompt to start New Game Plus, marking the end of the main storyline. What about the cult that is still out there trying to wipe out our entire family? What about the immortal triangle enthusiast guarding an underwater city claiming to be my real father? What about the staff of Hermes, the whole reason we're exploring these memories of an ancient Greek mercenary in the first place? I've since found videos on YouTube that showcase all 9 possible endings to the main questline, all being variations on the final showdown with Deimos and the subsequent family dinner. And fair play to anybody who actually played through this entire game 9 times just to see them all for themselves. They all feel like the last scene in the final episode of a long-running sitcom, where all the characters look around at each other with a "gosh, it's good to have everyone together again to live happily ever after" kind of vibe, or instead giving each other a "well, that just happened" sort of look. There's this one ending where either Alexios or Cassandra is alone in their family home with everyone else dead. They wander outside and share almost a knowing nod with their eagle Icarus before returning indoors. To me, this felt like they were saying, right, we still have work to do, this can't have all been for nothing. Which seems like a much better message to have at this point, when there are still unresolved and important plot threads to deal with. The ending came out of nowhere and was very lackluster and unsatisfying, just like your mum, and after I spent hours looking around for cult location clues, something else I'll come back to, the ending to the cult questline was equally confusing and abrupt, and I think I accidentally talked my way out of a boss fight. I can already imagine people telling me that this is all my own fault because I made the wrong choices, and I accept that to a degree. Many games have multiple endings, but the ones we remember and talk about don't have wrong endings, they have different endings. I made choices based on the options presented to me by the developers. Why is it possible that these lead to abrupt endings that don't feel like actual endings at all and don't resolve anything? Let's give this game some praise for a bit. This game looks amazing and runs fantastically. I feel confident saying that this is the brightest and most colourful game in the series so far. I loved seeing these ancient ruins I visited in the real world brought to life with all the vivid colour and bustling activity that has now been replaced with some bleached marble and tourists getting shouted at for putting their thermos on the 3,000-year-old stone. With a childlike glee, I would explore the ruins of Argos, Sunio and the Acropolis, retracing the steps I took when I was there in real life. The streets are full of NPCs going about their business, whether people are putting on impromptu plays, exercising, selling their tat, or just trying to get to work. The game was showing me new animations and NPC barks throughout my 50 or so hours with the game. The countryside is sprinkled with giant, historically inaccurate statues of mythological figures and gods, bringing a huge sense of wonder and grandeur to this already legendary landscape. From thick forests to white sand beaches, I found myself wishing that the upcoming VR title will just be the worlds of the games that we can wander around in and explore. Again, I'm biased because I already loved the setting going into this, but throughout my time with the game, I found myself occasionally stopping just to appreciate a good sunset or moonrise across the mountainous landscape beside me. God, I miss Greece. With my dialogue options ruining what might otherwise be a decent enough story and the world being an absolute gem, I guess that leaves us with the combat, so we'll start with the basics. The level system returns from Origins with the same problems that game had. The level system forces you to progress through this vast open world in a linear manner, and story missions don't give you enough XP so you can just focus on them, so you'll have to stop and grind some side missions if you want to progress. Maybe buying the XP boost for real world money removes this issue, but like all other microtransactions, this sort of thing can fuck off and die in a hole. No one should be okay with a company making their game worse to encourage you to give them extra money to fix it, because that's exactly what this is. The cheek of calling them time savers gets on my tits too. Give us money so you can spend less time playing the game. I could not give you any money and save 50 hours by not playing the game at all. There's no logic to that because it's bullshit. Anyway, levels also determine what weapons you can equip, and you can also equip different armor pieces. Whereas Origins had a dizzying amount of marginally different weapons for you to equip, the same now applies to hats and shoes and such. Thankfully, you can customize the appearance of your armor and weapons, so you could go for the naked and oiled appearance and still tank a good few warhammers to the face. You can also upgrade your weapons to be suitable for your current level, so if you get a weapon which has a plus 4% fire damage bonus you're fond of, you can bring that with you to the end of the game. Though that sort of upgrading does get expensive in the long run. This is a system that I have an issue with, but also one I could completely ignore throughout my playthrough. I'm not sure if there are people out there who get overly excited when they get a new weapon that does 1 more damage point with a plus 2% critical hit chance, but if that's you, then this game is going to keep you very happy. I'm not one of those people though, and I got through the entire game without much trouble, just swapping to whichever weapon had a green DPS number on it, which denotes that it's better than what I currently have equipped. Though I do find it weird that stabbing and smashing weapon damage is measured per second. Fire and poison weapons, sure, but something you hit people with seems like a weird way to measure that stat. I also completely ignored the engraving system due to the high material cost for minimal stat boosts. Again, I completely ignored this and got through the game just fine, so it can't make that much of a difference. Armor pieces also come with tiny little stat boosts that don't provide any noticeable effects, and all of this combines into an issue that I could see some players running into. Damage is split into 3 categories: stealth, ranged and melee, and there are stat boosts attached to weapons and armor that boost these stats. Weirdly, sometimes a bow might give you better melee damage or a hood might increase your range stat. Anyway, if someone were attempting to use this system properly, which I believe would be called min-maxing, you'd have to carry around 3 completely different sets of armor and weapons with you and swap depending on the situation. Equip all your assassin stat gear for when you sneak into a base, maybe swap to ranged equipment to hit a few distant targets, and then when you eventually get spotted, swap again to your warrior set and start chopping off heads. Seems like a faff, and like I say, this can be completely ignored if you restrict yourself to going after enemies close to your current level. Also, the cost of inscriptions was pretty high, and I was spending all of my money and materials on upgrading my ship, so I had none left over to improve my weapons. From a quick look at the in-game store, this seems like a deliberate attempt to push people to buy Helix credits to spend on buying crafting materials. But once again, like all in-game pay currencies, this can fuck off and die in a ditch along with the people that support this kind of horrible bullshit. You can swap the appearance of weapons and armor though, so you can improve your stats, but you have control over the way it looks, which is very much appreciated and something that I think all games with systems like this should have. The stealth in Odyssey is pretty much identical to Origins, with no trace of the so-called social stealth from the old games. This is standard open world stealth now, so you're crouching in bushes and hanging from walls. I did not get along with the range combat at all, so I mostly ignored it, but I did quite enjoy the melee stuff, which I found to be an improvement over Origins. I mainly used a sword or daggers throughout my game, though I did occasionally swap to a slower heavy weapon just to mix up the kill animations a bit. Enemies glow red to tell you that you need to dodge, and their weapons glisten in the sun when they can be parried. I preferred this system over Origins as it felt better suited to fighting groups than that game did, to the point where I found it easier to avoid using the lock-on feature whenever there are multiple enemies on screen. While I do enjoy Odyssey's style of combat, I would be interested to know if people think that this is better than the often mocked parry and execution combat from the earlier games. Because this is the exact same thing, it just takes many slashes to kill a person rather than just one. You dodge unblockable attacks and parry everything else and then spam R1 until they die. Seems just as repetitive to me, except you get less execution animations, so I found it less entertaining to watch. And it still irks me that a man wearing a cotton sheet and flip-flops can tank a spiked hammer to the body multiple times and still come at me swinging. This of course is due to the level system, returning largely unchanged from Origins. The world is split into different areas which are full of enemies within a fixed range of levels. This means that your progression through this beautiful open world is linear at first. One positive difference though is that lower level areas will rank up a bit with you, not matching your current level but always sticking a couple of levels beneath you, and the rewards from the quests within those areas scale up too. This means that quests in early game areas are always worth doing as the rewards are appropriate for your level, something Origins is sorely missing and makes grinding levels to attempt story missions less of a slog. Still a pain, but it is reduced. The flip side of this is if the world levels up with you, then you lose that feeling of becoming more powerful. Everything is either so strong that they will kill you outright or they're just about manageable. Enemies will never be more than a handful of levels beneath you, so you can't strut back to early areas and start one-shotting captains, which is a shame because that was quite therapeutic in Origins. Unfortunately, the quests and missions start to run out of creative juice after about 25 or 30 hours, which sounds like a lot, but it's only about halfway through the story. The game runs out of new things to show you, and almost everything boils down to kill someone in an outpost, though you might need to lower the stability of an area first. Outposts are again the same as Origins, having a few objectives to hit before you liberate it, whether it's killing captains, releasing prisoners, or collecting all the treasure. You can also burn war supplies that lower the stability of the region, which feeds directly into conquest battles. This game is set during the Peloponnesian War, and as such the areas of the map are divided between the red team and the blue team, or the Spartans and Athenians if you want to get historically accurate about it. Each of these areas also has a stability level, which you can lower by killing soldiers, burning and stealing war supplies, and eventually you can find their leader and take them out. Get the stability low enough and you can kick off a conquest battle. You start off by picking a side, either attacking or defending, with attacking offering more rewards while being slightly more challenging, and defending offering less rewards but being a bit easier. That said, I'm not sure why I would spend time murdering soldiers and leaders only to then rock up to those people's army tents and offer to help them out. These conquest battles were a bit of a pain for me at first, as I constantly found myself at the lower end of the level range for the area, so the enemies were taking me too long to kill. See, each army has a health bar, and killing enemies lowers this, with captains lowering it further than regular soldiers. When you're under-leveled, it takes longer to kill people, so I ended up losing these battles due to just taking too long. Eventually though, I only initiated these when I was a high enough level, and they became pretty easy, especially after a few skill unlocks. I did eventually give up doing these after a while because the only rewards are loot and XP, and later quests give both these out in spades. If it was possible to help one army take over the entire map, I might have done that for a bit of a laugh, but it's not possible for either capital city to be conquered, so I kind of forgot about this entire system after a while. Which brings us to another aspect of character upgrading, the skill tree. Split into one section for each damage type, again stealth, ranged and melee, most of these actually have some noticeable effect in combat. You can coat your weapons in poison or fire, or unlock the ability to rip shields away from enemies or rain down arrows on them. At higher levels you can turn invisible while sat still, or unlock a power attack that will one-shot most enemies through a flurry of hacks and slashes, and with certain weapons this can be chained a few times. You assign these skills to the face buttons and you can have 2 sets equipped for both melee and ranged, so you can have up to 8 skills set up for melee and stealth, and the other 8 for ranged attacks. I'll be honest that I did find it a bit cumbersome to switch between skill sets in the heat of battle, so I set up one for stealth stuff and the other for all-out combat, and I barely unlocked any ranged attacks, so they all stayed on one wheel. These skills cost adrenaline to use. I'm not sure if that's what this yellow bar is actually called, but that's what I call it. You gain adrenaline by hitting enemies and it fills up these bars. Different skills require different amount of bars. For example, that big flurry of attacks takes 3 bars and each skill has its own cooldown period, stopping you from spamming high powered attacks all day long. There were 2 skills that I never unequipped during my entire playthrough because they were so useful. Spartan Kick is straight out of 300 and has you punt people off the screen. It's like a physical fuss road dart. I use this to kick enemies off cliffs, separate high level animal pets from their masters, and to instantly take out enemies on ships, as there are a worrying amount of sharks patrolling the Mediterranean, killing soldiers seconds after they hit the water. I've got more to say about ship combat later, but for now I wanted to quickly talk about the healing skill. There are 3 levels to this and it costs 1 adrenaline bar to use, so you've got to get a few hits in before you can use it, and the cooldown means you can't spam it. I honestly think that this is the best healing method in the entire series. AC1 had health that would not regenerate in combat, meaning staying in a fight for long periods would eventually lead to death. The Ezio Trilogy introduced Medicine, which was removed for 3 and Black Flag but returned for Unity and Syndicate, and Origins let your health regenerate during combat if you'd unlocked that ability. Now, the fights in this game can get absolutely over the top and out of hand, thanks in part to the mercenary system, which I'll come back to because I've got a few opinions on that. If health didn't regenerate, you'd very quickly become overwhelmed to the point where you might as well just give up. If you had medicine, you could upgrade your carry capacity and pop a few whenever you needed it to keep going. But here you get 1 heal every so often and you have to attack a few times in order to use it. In a way, at a stretch, I guess it has some similarity to the regain system from Bloodborne, though in that game it's almost like taking your health back from an enemy, whereas here you almost take an enemy's health and then spend it on a heal for yourself. It doesn't fully heal you, but it keeps you in the fight, and you have to wait those few 10 seconds until you can pop off another one. Like I said, the battles can get piss-takingly huge in this game, but I always found myself sticking with them until the bitter end because this healing system gave me a fighting chance as long as I could keep blocking, dodging and getting a few hits in, creating just the right amount of tension in an otherwise fairly standard combat system. I mentioned the mercenary system there, so I'm going to talk about that now along with the Cult of Kosmos system, because personally I think the 2 should have been combined. Remember the Nemesis system from Shadow of Mordor? Remember how Warner Brothers copyrighted it so that no one else can use it? Well, Ubisoft have had a go at making their own, and have instead created a system more akin to the Wanted level from Grand Theft Auto, except more inconvenient and annoying. These mercenaries roam the landscape, similar to the Phylakes from Origins, except there's loads of them everywhere all the time, and they have randomly generated names and perks, similar to the Nemesis system. So for example, Fearless the Windswept might be enough levels above you that it doesn't even show you the number, it just shows a red skull to denote that you are fucked if you fight them. Mr. Windswept is immune to ranged attacks and has a pet bear that follows him around, though you'd only know this if you open the menu when the game told you that he'd been discovered, which it does automatically when you wander somewhere near them, at least from what I could tell. These notifications pop up so often that my brain just started blanking them out after the first few hours. If you start killing soldiers or civilians, you'll rack up your wanted level until it hits 1 of 5 helmets. Now, any mercenary near you will be out for your blood. You can see them on the map and the game does tell you when they are nearby, but 9 times out of 10 I found this happen while I was already having a fight with some other people, and then one of these mercs will turn up and join in. Killing them will up my wanted level further, seemingly drawing in mercs from further away. This creates a feedback loop that keeps the combat escalating until you manage to kill all the guards and the nearby mercs and then pay off your bounty through the map screen to get them to leave you alone. You do get some high level loot from killing mercenaries, and there's some sort of merc ranking system that I didn't understand the purpose of or have any interest in climbing, though I did end the game in rank 2 for whatever that's worth. The system just ended up being a pain in the arse and a regular tax on my income, as I would just pay off any bounty as soon as I built it up just to stop random mercenaries jumping into the fight when I'm just trying to clear an outpost. Then there's the Cult of Kosmos system, which I was excited about when I first saw it, but became less enthused about as the game went on. Once you discover the cult, you get access to this screen, which shows their entire network, though the identity of each member is a mystery. You'll have to follow clues and find items in the world that reveal the identity and location of the members, and then you can go after them. Kill all 5 of them in one arm and you get the location of the captain, and after killing all of them you can go after the boss. For most of the game this generally happens naturally, with many quests having cult members as their targets, and others I stumbled across by pure coincidence. For example, one just happened to be the captain of a ship which tried to kill me. Thing is, after the unsatisfying ending of the story missions, I decided to focus on wiping out the entire cult, and this is where the system became a massive pain in the arse. You'll get some vague clue about where to find the item that reveals someone's identity and location, and I've got 2 examples of bullshittery with this. One clue was he shipwrecked north of this island, so I jumped in my ship and went looking around the north of the island. There were no visual clues on the surface of the water, but after 20 minutes or so of randomly sailing around, a map marker pops up on my compass. I swim down and find a shipwreck, but there's no loot here that reveals any details. After more searching, I almost gave up until I found a nearby sunken temple with an ornate treasure chest inside it. That wasn't it either. I gave up, looked it up online, and it turned out to be in a little box inside of a tree trunk out of sight of the shipwreck that the clue mentioned. Another example clue said that he owns a marble quarry in Attica, so I travelled to Attica and cleared out the quarry. Nothing. The clue says I should help people out in the area, which I assume might mean the captives in the quarry. Turns out that it actually means to complete quests in that region. Which quests? Fuck you, do all of them. Turns out I had to get 3 quests deep into a specific quest chain to earn the information on that one cult member. Later on there's a quest linked to Atlantis, which I'll come back to in more detail later, but those also require you to go to an area and just do quests until you happen across one that gives you the reward you are looking for. This is just padding in a game that does not need any more padding. The quest ends with the revelation that the leader of the cult is a lady you work with in Corinth and Athens, which certainly was a shock to me when this was revealed. When I went to confront her though, I was met with confusing dialogue that left me unsure as to what was actually going on and not really understanding what my dialogue options meant. We seemed to part on good terms, and I think Aspasia wanted the cult dead so she can start the Order of Ancients? Maybe? I don't really know. Personally, I think a better way to pull off the Cult of Kosmos system would be to have each member you kill give you part of a clue towards the identity and location of their captain, and you'd have to kill everyone in that arm to be able to target them. You learn about the lower level members by looting the corpses of the mercenaries that come after you, linking these mercs to the cult that's vowed to wipe out your bloodline. That will tie these systems together and give the mercenaries more of a purpose, and also giving you motivation to hunt them down. Speaking of trawling all over the landscape looking for things, I initially liked the idea of the immersive method of quest finding. When you get a quest, you will get a couple of bullet points giving you clues on where to go, so you have to figure it out for yourself and make your way there. I liked the idea of this, but soon realised it was so basic that all it really did was add an extra step into quest completion. It will give you clues like north of this village but west of the mountain, which a quick look on your map would let you figure it out in about 5 seconds. Or maybe I'm just really good at reading maps because I've got my bronze and silver Duke of Edinburgh award. When you get near the target area, you'll get a prompt to use your drone bird, who acts in the exact same way as Origins, to locate your target. Thing is, even with this immersive discovery mode turned off, you still have to use the bird drone to find your target, and most of the time I found it was right in front of my bird, so I located the target instantly. This is just quest markers but with extra steps, and it's just even more padding in an already massive game. Earlier I mentioned how the voice acting is of a lower quality here, especially with the low budget looking dialogue scenes, and while that is true, I did eventually get used to it and settled in for the ride. I guess you could say that there's a thin layer of camp throughout this game, and the tone is fairly similar to Assassin's Creed 2 in terms of balancing light-hearted moments with more serious plot points. Most of Cassandra's buddies act as comic relief, with Barnabas and Socrates being welcome sights in cutscenes. You can also sleep with a surprising amount of people in this game, so I played it as an ancient Greek female version of Captain Kirk, turned on by fighting and attracted to anyone with a pulse. This in itself does lead to some funny scenarios, like accidentally sleeping with someone's father, or popping back to a hunter priestess for some nookie after killing a legendary wolf. You don't have sex with Socrates, or at least I didn't get the option to, but you do get some philosophical discussions with him, and there's a character literally called Testicles who gets wasted and eaten by a shark. Nothing hilarious here, but I did breathe sharply out of my nose on many occasions during my time with the game. Barnabas is the captain of a ship called the Adrestia, which he lets you take command of after you save him from a mercenary. With Greece having 1 or 2 islands to explore, the seas are yours to wander at your leisure, complete with booty to dive underwater for and pirates to fight off. Mechanically, this is almost exactly the same as Black Flag, which makes for quite satisfying mechanics, and boarding is being sped up a bit so you don't need to sit through 2 small cutscenes and a menu every time you clear a ship. The thing is, throwing spears and firing arrows just doesn't have the same awe and drama as a volley of cannon fire, with successful shots not feeling as satisfying as they do in Black Flag. Well, except for the killing blow with your spears where the camera follows one into the body of an enemy sailor. That's always cool to watch. What wasn't cool to watch was the modern day sections, which left me feeling like I'd missed a game or something. Maybe this is covered in DLC for Origins, but when I last saw Layla at the end of that game, she agreed to go with William Miles, but was adamant that she was not necessarily joining the Assassins. In this game, we meet her leading her own team of assassins, the members of which have a storied past together. What the hell happened? They're looking for the staff of Hermes, though I had forgotten that by the end of the game, to be honest, because we get very little modern stuff to actually do here. One thing that did make me laugh is at the start of the game we see that they have found Cassandra's spear, which was used by King Leonidas during the Battle of Thermopylae. This is the item that they use to access the DNA that the Animus needs to explore memories, but they say that they have found 2 DNA sources on there, one for Cassandra and one for Alexios. This works as a means to explain why we can choose our player character, but then we spend the next 50 or so hours pushing this spear through the chests and necks of half the military population of Greece, never mind however many people her granddad had terminated with it, so it's amazing that they didn't find thousands of DNA strands to dive into the memories of. The modern story ends with Layla at the gates of Atlantis, which I know is setting up for the Atlantis DLC, but that shit's still about 30 quid and I didn't pay that much for the base game. Cassandra is sent there by her mother to meet her real father, who turns out to be Pythagoras, who is also immortal. He wants you to seal the gate to the Lost City, which requires 4 keys scattered across the country. This translates to you going to 4 areas and completing random quests until you find them, kind of like I mentioned earlier. Once you do find them, the actual quests themselves are pretty good though, having you defeat 4 creatures from Greek mythology. You have to solve riddles from a sphinx and then kill a minotaur, a cyclops and a gorgon. The treasures they are guarding are apples of Eden, and these fit into slots in Atlantis that will unlock dialogue spoken by who I believe to be Juno. This is as deliberately vague and wibbly wobbly as this stuff has always been, but then I ended up in a boss fight against my triangle-loving immortal father after asking him to give up the staff of Hermes that he's been looking after. At the end of the fight, he relents and gives Cassandra the staff, instantly dying as the staff is granting him immortality. Kind of like the Shroud from Syndicate, but more rigid. It then turns out that Cassandra is still alive and reveals herself to Layla in the modern day in a snappy business suit and passes on the staff. This brings up several questions, like did she not learn about the Doomsday event that the Isu spent millennia trying to warn humans about? And did she not think to step in with the whole assassin and Templar thing? If I understood the chat she has with Layla, it seems like she says that you can't have control without chaos and vice versa, and the Templars are trying to enforce complete control while the assassins represent chaos through freedom. Does this not mean that the Assassins and Templars should not be trying to wipe each other out? That they both need to exist to keep this balance? I don't know, maybe the DLC explains it better, but like I say, I'm too cheap to buy it. And all of this whole entire thing, everything I've talked about brings me to easily the biggest issue I have with this game, keeping in mind that overall I did enjoy it. This is not an Assassin's Creed game in any way. I know, shocker, I think I'm the first person to make this observation. There's no hidden blade, there's no eagle vision, there are no assassins and no Templars. There aren't even those Animus corridor things when you kill your targets. Which is a shame because I really liked what they did with them in Origins. This is just another Ubisoft open world game with Assassin's Creed written on the box, and as enjoyable as I found it, I think this is a pretty shitty business practice. In Origins, when we were given the hidden blade, we're told that it was used to kill Xerxes, so I figured we would get our hands on it eventually in this game. But no, it's not even mentioned. Frankly, I think Origins was pushing their luck with the lack of assassin stuff, as showing the actual origin of the Order in the final cutscene and then expanding on it in DLC is absolute bullshit. They should have set this game during the Greco-Persian War, where you play as Leonidas' child, out to avenge his death at the Battle of Thermopylae by killing Xerxes. Xerxes would be the big villain of the game, and it turns out he's a member of some new group calling themselves the Order of Ancients, and you and your buddies develop the first hidden blades and use it to kill him. Boom. Direct connection with the established lore and groups from the series. You then set yourself up as a group dedicated to snuffing out the rest of the Order and unify under a symbol which you based off the Spartan symbol we see everywhere. Then Origins could have you be a member of this group from the start, but have Bayek and Aya establish the creed that marks the true origins of the Brotherhood that we see in AC1. Easy. Ubisoft, give me a job, I'll make sure whatever comes after Mirage is a hit. So according to my list, that's everything I have to say about Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and this has easily turned into the longest video I've made so far. The least Assassin's Creed game of the series, easily the longest so far, and certainly one of the most polarizing in terms of people's opinions. Which leads me to my opinion, and where would I put it in my series ranking? As I said, I do like this game, just like I enjoy many other Ubisoft open world games. I understand why they have the reputation that they do, but if you don't play them all the time, they can be a nice change of pace. A game to just switch off to and enjoy some different scenery while murdering people, whether that's in Ghost Recon, Far Cry or Assassin's Creed. And I did enjoy this game more than Origins, despite it being obvious that that game had more time and care taken on it. Ancient Greece is just such an excellent setting, and they really did it justice here, and they improved on some of the problems I had with Origins, though they did add some other bullshit which I'm not so keen on, and we once again can't pet the animals, despite being able to pet cows in Assassin's Creed 3. So, it goes here, above Origins but below AC1. For all its flaws, Assassin's Creed 1 is unique, something that I feel objectively cannot be said about Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I enjoyed my time with the game, but it was a slog, and while I will return to it at some point, I won't be running back in a hurry. Though if the DLC goes on sale at some point, I might pick that up. Which, boys, girls and everyone else, leaves us looking forward to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which, when I started making these videos, would have been the last game in the series, but by the time this comes out, Mirage will probably be out now as well. I've not played 1 second of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but what's interesting is that other than Assassin's Creed 3 Remaster, for some reason, it has the lowest user rating on Steam in the series, sitting at a mixed. I'm not sure why that is, for either game really, and I know next to nothing about this one other than it's set in England and obviously there's Vikings going Viking in it. I'm still working my way through it, and I'm not going to meet my goal of being able to complete it before Mirage comes out, but I'm still streaming it occasionally over on Twitch, so please do come and join me over there, where you can berate me about how the mercenary system is actually excellent and I'm just a scrub for not understanding the benefit of weapon engravings. Or just leave a comment here and I'll read it while I'm in a haze before going to bed and never write a reply to it.
But there can only be one winner! Sparta! Yours is eternal glory!